Hi, Trent. It's great to chat with you. I know you do a ton of YouTube videos are surrounded by sales and cold calling. So I really want to know, how did you get into this?
Nicole, I'm fired up to be here. I didn't know what I wanted to do leaving university. I had a dream to get a sales job in a big city, and there happened to be a few companies recruiting at my university. And I applied to all the ones that were offering roles outside of the state of Ohio, where I grew up at. Ended up getting hired at a fast growing tech company. 4.5 years later, promoted from sales development rep to a senior account executive. 60,000 cold calls later, tens of millions of dollars of pipeline. So we put in the reps and we're still in the trenches every day.
That's amazing. 60,000 cold calls. Be your name.
and we're,
I
and we're talking outbound cold calls as well. So I am finding the prospects. I mean, we have a marketing department. We get some warm leads that help us identify the low hanging fruit. But we're going in accounts. We're identifying the target buyer. We're using LinkedIn Sales Nav, Zoom Info, putting them in outreach, and we're making the cold calls and whatever it takes to make it happen.
So what's the biggest obstacle you face? Because I do cold calls as well, and I have a team of people that help me out. And I'm just curious, like what's your biggest obstacle?
The biggest obstacle is gaining the prospect's attention. And it's the challenge we face creating content. It's the challenge any businesses faces acquiring new customers is people don't always buy the best product. They buy from who they know. And as you think about cold calling, imagine if you bought a car and I said, Nicole, it's only going to start 6% of the time. You want to buy the car? You'd say, there's no way. So as you
I'd
think
be
about
like, is
cold
this guy
calling, it's
crazy?
well, hey, used car salesman over here. No, I'm kidding. I sell software, but the answer rate for most outbound cold callers is around the 6% mark. So the challenge is, how do you gain somebody's attention so that they actually answer your phone call? And there's a few different ways to go about that. And it's one of the fun aspects I like about cold calling is I believe that I'm one call away from changing my week, quarter, month. So in those times when it seems like no one's answering, hey, everyone's on holiday, hey, everyone's working from home, they don't answer anymore, they've caught into our tactics, you're one call away from changing everything. So it's the consistency to gain the attention, sending the emails, adding value in voice messages, doing whatever it takes, and ultimately being willing to interrupt somebody's day, because you are going out of your way to interrupt people's days to make the ask for the time so that you can set the meetings.
Yeah, and follow up. Follow up for me, I think, is just that's what makes it or breaks it. It's not the initial cold call, it's the follow up for me. That's the trend I've noticed. You find that the same for you?
I'll tell you a recent story about follow up. So when I first became an account executive after promoting from an SDR, account executive, I'm generating my own pipeline and working sales cycles. When I originally got my book of business, there was this credit union in my book of business, and they were an existing customer with a different product line. And one of my colleagues managed that relationship. I identified, hey, this is exactly who I want to sell to. They're a perfect use case here. I knew exactly the contact that could buy. And over the course of 2 years, he would maybe answer my phone once, he would no-show the meeting, ended up cold calling him over 57 times, eventually set the meeting, and 2.5 months later, closed the deal, $20,000 ARR license, annual recurring revenue. So the point of the story is just never giving up. It's the consistency, and you must be willing to be persistent. And eventually you'll gain their attention, catch them at the right time, set up the meeting. So if you continuously follow up, it will put you in the best position to find success.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love it. It's great. But, I also want to challenge you on that for a second. It's the follow up and no matter what it takes mentality. I get all that. But it's also, I find where you need to put your attention is really important as well. So it's not only gaining the attention, but where you put your attention and energy, right decision makers, right opportunities, so that you're not, because it can become like an ego game, like, oh, I have to get in. I have to get in. This guy's giving me a hard time, or this girl's giving me a hard time. I have to get in. The ego kind of takes over. So it's almost like balancing both, right? How do you deal with big egos out there? I mean, I'm sure you have no problem because you just how do you do it? I'm curious.
Well, the thing is, I'm not so worried about ego or getting in the account. I just look at it and I say, look, I have a quota. Let's say it's $100,000. I need to close in new revenue this quarter. In order to hit that revenue target, I need at least 4x pipeline coverage. So I need $400,000 in pipeline. So when I start to break that down and say, okay, I have a book of business, a list of accounts. Some accounts are better than other accounts. And to your point around finding the right prospects, you want to be really cognizant of the level you're selling at. So are you trying to target a C level, a director, a manager? Are they the actual economic buyer decision maker, or are they more of a program owner admin? What
Mhm.
industry is the account in? And all of these are variables that will dictate you reaching out to the account. So in the particular case of this credit union, it wasn't more so ego of I need to get in this account. It's more so, hey, they're a great fit for our solution. And it
Mhm.
would be selfish of me not to continue to reach out if I truly believe that they can benefit from my product service solution. So that's really my thinking and my North Star of what keeps me going and calling over the course of 2 years to eventually set the meeting.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, what goes hand in hand with cold calling? When we look at sales as a whole, right? What goes hand in hand with cold calling? Do you find any other activities that work really well with the cold call?
As I think about modern pipeline generation, and this is the advice I give to all sales development reps, is be ruthless with your time and ask yourself, how does this activity get me closer to pipeline generation? And when you actually break it down, what needs to be done to generate pipeline, it starts with your territory plan and then prospecting in the right accounts in the right places, to your point earlier. So finding prospects to call. Next step is reaching out to those prospects, and you have the cold calls, and then you also have the cold emails. Those to me are the two most proven channels. You, of course, have referrals. You could send a handwritten note. You could show up, knock on a door. You could try and social sell. You can try and use marketing. But the most two direct channels are cold calling and cold emailing. So when I identify a prospect that I want to reach out to, I'm going to add them to what I call a sequence, which is basically a comment. We have a tool for this that automates a lot of the tasks and management of that for efficiency. But I'm always starting with a cold email, and then I'm going to follow up the next day and cold call them. And if I get them on the phone, hey, the reason I'm calling you, Nicole, is I'm following up on a recent email I'd sent you. Noticed you oversee this role. Da da da. Let's set up a meeting. So it's the emails, it's the calls, it's leaving voice messages, and it's using all of the channels at your disposal to gain their attention long enough to set the meeting.
Right. I love it because you know what? Many people are so caught up now with social media and, it's so it's like too much after a while, right? And they think, well, no, I don't need to make a call. But I agree with you. You do need to make the call. People do need to get out there and have that personal touch because it's missing. It's missing. And people think, oh, I don't need to. They just don't want to do it, right? They just don't want to do it.
A few of the biggest misconceptions I've seen is that people think that they can out promote the need to cold call. And I see this around me as folks start to attain more success, more pay, higher levels. They think, oh, I don't need to call. I don't still need to grind. So I feel fortunate early in my career, someone gave me the advice. They say, Trent, cold calling's never going away. Whether you like it or not, you may as well learn to master it. So I put my head down and said, I'm just going to make as many calls as I can. I'm going to learn the process, and then I'm going to keep making as many calls as I can. And to your point, personal touch is important, but it's those times when you don't think you should be calling. That's exactly when is the best time to call. So Friday afternoons, Monday mornings, the first 3 days of that week of Thanksgiving, when you say, oh, everyone's out of the office, being willing to call when others are unable or unwilling, that's how you separate yourself, because those executives you're trying to reach out to, they are still working at those times, but your competition is not calling. So it makes it easier for you to find success.
I love it. I love it. And what do you do to stay motivated? Because I know, I mean, what would you tell others to do to stay motivated? Because it comes in kind of like waves, right? There are moments where you're like, yeah, I got it. I'm going to do more. I'm like, things are moving. And then there are other waves where you're like, oh my God, if I get another hang up or if I get another short person on the line, like, I don't want to do this. So how do you stay motivated? And what would you tell others to do to stay motivated?
I'm not sure how many sports gamblers or gamblers you have in your audience, Nicole, but as you think about gambling, you go and play this game or you bet on a sports event, whatever it may be, and you're excited by the upside potential. If I hit this bet, I'm going to win money. And if you end up losing the bet, more oftentimes than not, you chase your losses and you get more excited by the possibility of making money back and even making more money. So rejection and loss fuels you to take more action. And what I observe in the B2B sales space and cold calling is people get discouraged by the idea of rejection when it's actually an incredibly healthy thing. In sales, you're paid to be told no. So when you can remove this false belief of rejection is bad, and the reason it's bad is because psychologically we're programmed as humans. We want to be accepted by other people. We don't want to be in conflict because we're at risk of being removed from the tribe. And that's how we were evolutionarily evolved. So when we face rejection, it feels weird. When we're dealing with objections, it feels weird because we're defying social norms. But you need to reprogram your mind to say, it's actually in my best interest to keep going and use the rejection as an excuse to take more action. So I would advise your audience, Nicole, to be very intentional with their targets in setting goals, because if you don't have a clear target you're working towards, you'll of course lose motivation because you don't know where you're going.
Exactly. You can't just flip a coin and say, okay, I'm going to make X amount of calls today and then I'm done for the day, right? Like you need to, push yourself. I agree. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Any last minute points you want to make?
What I'll add is that it's in addition to the motivation, the mentality, also having the right systems in place. So something I follow is I have a pipeline generating system. So I'm not tracking the amount of calls I'm making. I'm tracking the amount of live conversations I'm having. I'm tracking the amount of meetings I'm actually setting. I'm tracking the amount of cold calls I'm sending, the amount of opportunities I'm converting from initial meeting to actual qualified opportunity. So identify what are the most meaningful activities in your role and track those, because you can't improve what you can't measure. One day you'll feel motivated, the next day you won't. But if you don't have a way of deciphering between did I win the day, yes, no, then you'll continuously be inconsistent. So find the system with the motivation, and that's the winning recipe.
Yeah, consistency is key. Thank you so much. And what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Trent Dressel, connect with you. And yeah, let's make some dials. Happy pipeline, happy life.
All right. Thank you so much.